everyone. Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him, and I write about movies for some places, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living.
My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network, and I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
This week on the show, as always, we are talking about movies. Yay! Woo-hoo! So the three movies we have on the docket this week, we have the documentary No Ordinary Man about Billy Tipton. We have the documentary Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain. That's the entire name of the movie, by the way. I'm not just
that's
adding
the
that
title.
on. And then our last movie of the evening will be the first movie in the Fear Street trilogy on Netflix, the Fear Street trilogy, 1994. Is that the year? Someone help me.
Yes.
Okay.
Fear Street trilogy, or Fear Street trilogy part 1, 1994. Or no, just Fear Street part 1. I'm messing this up.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, you get the idea, though, people.
Yes.
It's the Fear Street thing. It's the first movie.
But it is 1994.
And before we get started, though, I did want to mention over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/spoilerpiece. If you are a $5 patron, you get exclusive audio each week. And this week, we are talking about Nora Ephron's 1998 romantic comedy, You've Got Mail, starring Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. And it's a fun chat. Evan had never seen it before, which is kind of a theme lately on the Patreon page.
Yeah.
So
it's a chance for me to see movies I haven't seen before.
And as Evan loves the 90s, not as much as he does the 80s, but he loves the 90s, you'll be pleased to hear what we have to say about it, I think. I don't know. So anyway, let's kick things off this week with No Ordinary Man. This is a documentary by Chase Joint and Ailing Chin Yi. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, so I apologize if I mispronounce it. And No Ordinary Man is, this is the IMDb summary. It's an in-depth look at the life of musician and transculture icon Billy Tipton. Complicated, beautiful, and historically unrivaled, this groundbreaking film shows what is possible when a community collaborates to honor the legacy of an unlikely hero. So I didn't really know. I mean, I knew who Billy Tipton was. I didn't know the whole backstory. Billy Tipton was a jazz musician, a trans man, and after he died, he was outed. I mean, how would you describe it? And there was kind of this really unflattering and cruel, emotionally violent biography written about him that misgendered him over and over, and et cetera, and just kind of is ugly. And this is a documentary basically about getting his legacy in the positive light that it should be. Does that make sense? Did I do that right? I don't know.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It is about reclaiming trans history and queer history, and about not only portraying him in a positive light, but also portraying him the way he should be by using his masculine pronouns, not assuming that he was a woman in a suit trying to just be someone playing jazz music, but was actually a trans man. So correcting the historical erasure of trans people.
Yeah, there's the biography I can't remember the name of the author now, but that was written about Billy Tipton.
Diane Middlebrook.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Written by Diane Middlebrook. The contention of the biography, from what I understand from the documentary, is that Billy Tipton was passing as a man simply to be a jazz performer, which even on its face, that sounds kind of way too simplistic. So,
yeah, it's nuts to even think that that's a viable theory in the first place. Like, I mean, like, why would someone go to those lengths to live that kind of lie if that was the case? Like,
and also after you retired from the thing that you supposedly were doing it for,
right?
You know. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was the fucking ugliness of the. I mean, I don't really remember watching Oprah and Sally Jesse and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I know who they all. Obviously, I know who Oprah is, and I know who Sally Jesse is. But like, watching those talk shows where Billy Tipton's son, Billy Tipton Jr., is defending his father, and just the audience members, in addition to the hosts, are being fucking horrible. It's just like, ay. And we haven't come that far, by the way.
No, sadly, no, because people, especially interview hosts of shows, are still wildly obsessed with trans bodies in very inappropriate and invasive and transphobic ways. But yeah, I mean, those shows were notorious for perpetuating, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, queerphobia, you name it. But to see it, the editing is just brutal, seeing it back to back to back and seeing not only Billy Tipton Jr. defending his father, but also his widow, his wife,
right,
also defending him. And she's fascinating in the sense that she uses his correct pronouns. She calls him her husband. She calls him father. But then later, it's very heartbreaking to hear that she's like, I would have listened to him, but if he had told me this sooner, I wouldn't have stayed with him. And it's just, it's gutting. But to see her also defend his gender to a national audience is just, it's appalling.
Yeah, seeing how they turned his death into this salacious, gross thing. Yeah, that's really tough to see. And I think I like that this documentary features interviews with trans people, both like trans academics, but then also trans actors, because there is an angle to this documentary where they're essentially taking trans actors and having them. It's a mock audition for scenes or imagined scenes from Billy Tipton's life. And I think that adds an interesting perspective of seeing different trans actors talking about their experiences and then also kind of showing that again, those conversations against the quote unquote auditions scenes.
Right.
Yeah, I loved that aside from Billy Tipton Jr., every single person we hear from is trans. And that's so great and is necessary. And the only other documentary I can think of like that is Disclosure, which we covered before, which is such a great documentary. Yeah. But I love that. And this is a simple thing, but it's such a great touch nonetheless. I love that all of the talking heads are being interviewed in clubs, and most of them are in the same club, but it looks like there might be two different clubs because they look a little different or just different parts. And I love that the score that we're hearing is Billy Tipton's piano music, which is so great.
Yeah. This documentary is really smart in addition to being, I thought, fascinating, but and
emotional. Oh my God, I don't know about you guys, but I was a mess by the end of this.
Yeah, it hits you in a lot of places that hurt. I think kind of linking back around to Disclosure, which I think is an incredible documentary. I wish that this documentary was more engaging to me. I think the problem is that I didn't feel like this was an hour and a half story that was being stretched to an hour. I felt like the story was being stretched. It just didn't feel like there was a lot that they had to go off of. Like there was some interviews, there was like a little bit of photos. There was not really much aside from talk in terms to lean on. And so I feel like they were kind of like stretching it out, especially because some of the conversations start to take on a broader perspective, much like Disclosure, where we're talking a lot more about like broader trans experiences and less so about Billy Tipton's life specifically. And I think that was something I struggled with because I liked hearing this story. I was not aware of it. And I really loved the perspective of having trans people speaking in the documentary and offering their perspectives. But I just feel like it was kind of a stretch for me in terms of like holding my attention for that amount of time.
No, I had such a different reaction. I loved that it widened the scope and talked about multitude of trans experiences, because that's kind of the point, that as one of the talking heads says, that there is no one trans experience. There are so many. And I think it's incredibly important to contextualize Billy Tipton's story, not just because it's important to get history right, but also because it's important to reclaim queer history and trans history. it's important to acknowledge that not every trans person medically transitions and they're still trans. And it's important to talk about how there's a difference between gender identity and sexual identity, and the, discussions of passing and outing and disclosure and all of these things. I think it's so, so important. And one of my favorite lines in the film, Zachary Drucker says, and she says, trans people's survival through history is based on invisibility. And it's scary when centuries of your survival have been based on not being seen. And I think I hear what you're saying, Evan, but and there isn't necessarily a lot to go on other than what they have in the documentary as far as the archival footage, both audio and visual, and talking to his son. But I think it's so important to talk about how Billy Tipton's life impacted so many other people. And I think it dovetails in a really beautiful and moving and compelling way at the end when his son is watching all of these people talk about what a huge impact he had on their lives. Because he's like, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one who cared about him or remembered him. And so I love that it widened the scope. I think that's a really necessary component of this story.
I don't have a problem with widening the scope. I just felt like there were a lot of pieces of the documentary that felt like they were padding. Like the audition piece, like I didn't find that part that compelling. Like the interviews with the people talking about it, I found compelling, and I really liked the perspectives. And I agree, like that line that you mentioned was absolutely devastating. There's some real like disclosure. There are definitely some moments where you just, as someone who isn't trans, like you hearing their perspective, you're like, oh, I never thought about it like that before. And that's just absolutely devastating to think about it in that way. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I felt like there was probably a much tighter, more compelling documentary here that was not an hour and a half, but maybe like a super compelling like hour or like 45 minutes.
Well, I mean, my experience was similar to Megan's. I really enjoyed this a lot. I think I wouldn't say it was a problem, but because there is really no archive footage of Billy Tipton, there's no film footage that they found. There's lots of still photographs, and of course there's a couple of records and things like that. And then they had some audio clips from recordings he'd made in the 70s for, I think it was for like a Christmas thing or something like that the family was having, mentioning his emphysema at some point, by the way. But I really, talking heads in documentaries, I'm usually kind of like, talking head documentaries, yeah, fine. But
ditto usually.
Yeah, but these really worked for me simply because I don't have a lot of experience. I don't know the trans experience is not, it's not my experience. So to hear other experiences of other people is I think really, and I don't think you're not saying it's valuable, Evan. I found it really valuable. And also how all of the perspectives, even though there's like a similar through line, all of the perspectives are so different. I mean, it's just like any other subject that you don't know about that you want to learn about. And I found it really compelling. Especially, I can't remember his name, but has a shaved head and a beard. And he was great. I don't remember his name.
Stefan Pennington?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a Tufts professor of, I think, musicology. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
And really. I should say, I'm saying it's a very good chance they use they, their pronouns, because I'm not aware of their pronouns. But yes. Great.
Right. And, I liked a lot of the talking heads, but the other one I liked a lot was Marquise Wilson, who I was just like, just so compelling. Anyway, and Susan Stryker is cool. I mean, I know who Susan Stryker is, but totally. But anyway, a lot of good talking head stuff in this, I thought, which is unusual for a documentary for me to enjoy the talking head part. So yay, No Ordinary Man.
I agree. I want to say something since you brought up Stefan Pennington, that my favorite thing that's said that they say is talking about history and about existing. And if you only exist in the present, if you exist in the present only, and it's a problem for marginalized people, your history is erased and you exist now. So what's the big deal? But then you don't have roots, you don't have traditions. And that means this place doesn't belong to you. But this is our place as well. And it's such a moving sentiment. And it also got me thinking about why it's not only why is history still so important and knowing history and discussing it, but also this is why queer period films matter. This is why queer documentaries matter, and trans period films and trans documentaries, but only if you get them right, not like, awful representations. But yeah, I think there's just so many great pieces. And they're like, this is probably, I am cis, but this is something that was very personal that moved me, was seeing the reaction to Original Plumbing magazine, which I have given as a gift to someone who's very dear to me, who is a trans person and a trans masculine person, and seeing that reaction of, oh my God, I'm not alone. There are other people like me. There are other bodies like mine. And I think that is just, and again, I say this as a cis person, but I think that's something that's invaluable. And it's so important to see ourselves represented. And so I think that this film just speaks so eloquently to that, to, reclaiming this one man's history, which is so important, and beautiful piano playing music too, by the way, as well, in addition to that. But also I think it's so important on a larger scale too. And this I think was wonderful and just really, really moved me in a really impactful way.
Yeah. Do we have anything to add? Anybody else?
I would just agree that line that you mentioned, Megan, about tradition and the importance of queer storytelling really resonated with me as well. I already know that representation is important, but it really, this particular story, brings it back into sharp relief again, of needing to tell these stories and needing to reclaim them when they've been taken away from you, especially as it was in this case of, kind of having a good chance to rewrite Billy Tipton's legacy and to really discuss why it's important to the trans community.
And also not dehumanize a life and to be respectful. And I think that's something that you think goes without saying, but yet witnessing other cis people's reactions to trans people is perpetually disappointing at best and awful and scary at worst. And so, yeah, so I think this documentary, I feel, straddles a great line where it's acknowledging all of those awful things and the awful rewriting of history to Billy Tipton in an inaccurate and transphobic and disrespectful way, to rewriting it to be trans inclusive and respectful and all of those things. But it also feel like there's something very celebratory about it, which is a lovely balance to achieve.
Well, you said it better than I could, so.
Oh, I don't know about that, but thank you.
Well, then, on that note, perhaps we should move on to Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain.
Oh God, we're going from one heavy documentary to another.
To another heavy documentary, heavy in a different way, but very heavy, and nonetheless. I mean, wow. Well, I mean, I think everybody knows who Anthony Bourdain is, but just in case you don't, here's your IMDb logline. A documentary about Anthony Bourdain and his career as a chef, writer, and host, revered and renowned for his authentic approach to food, culture, and travel. And of course, it is much deeper than that, which we will get into. But, it's funny that this movie, and of course it would do this because he did die by suicide, that it explores the depths of his psychic pain, which you can thank you, which you can see throughout his entire career, in dribs and drabs, and you can,
especially if you watch the shows and
absolutely
soaked in him as a personality.
And I would say this is a really the thing that's, I think it's really hard for people, not all people, but people who struggle with depression or are afflicted by it or whatever verb you want to use. It's difficult for them to be their authentic selves. And you can see that throughout his entire career. And he comes across, if you've only seen a couple episodes of one of his shows or something, he can seem kind of glib or kind of like a bro even at times, but he was a multi-layered, incredibly complex, deeply haunted person who was, the best way I can put it was, he was a nice person disguised as a monster, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm kind of overstating it, but he's got like that gruff exterior, but then at his center, he was a very sensitive, caring, kind of gentle soul. And I think that he struggled with that. And I think this documentary does well illuminating that, especially through, this is another documentary where the talking heads, normally there are a lot of talking heads in this movie, considering how much footage there is of Anthony Bourdain. And I also want to mention that he narrates this through old voiceovers and snippets of his books. And so it's truly impactful in that way, because it's like he's telling the story of his own death, which is not all that it's about, but
no, but he was a very introspective guy. So
yeah,
I think that's where it was helpful in terms of being able to pull from voiceover. And I really enjoyed this documentary. I would say more of a casual fan of Anthony Bourdain. Like I would watch some of his shows, but I do feel like this documentary does a great job of capturing his essence as a person in all his complexities, but also they talk about in the film, as a writer, his way with words and the way he can convey so much through his words. He was a very vivid storyteller, and I think that definitely came across in this, and it just reminded me of all the times I would enjoy watching his shows and seeing him travel places and then hearing his very introspective voiceover about the experience that he was having.
Yeah. Megan, how about you?
Yeah, so I think this is a great documentary, and I mean, that should come as no surprise because Morgan Neville is a really fantastic documentary filmmaker. And it is really fascinating to have such an intimate documentary that, combines Bourdain's own voice and thoughts about himself and his life, and as well as to hear talking heads that are not traditional talking heads in the sense of there's no expert, but there are the people who were closest to him, one of his ex-wives, his friends and his colleagues, many of whom I am fans of or familiar with, like Eric Ripert and David Chang. And so, yeah, I think it weaves those elements really fluidly. I think this is a really gutting meditation on not only knowing that his life is over, but also about mental health and suicide and depression, but also about the ravages of addiction. And I think it was really interesting because I knew he had dealt with a drug addiction long ago. I've known this for a very long time. And when the film starts and it's talking about how he was into drugs, but then it kind of glosses over it. And I'm like, wait, let's go back. How did he get into recovery? And how did he do that? Because that's not easy. And then it's like, oh, because it didn't seem like he really did necessarily deal with it. Yes, he was he was sober in that he wasn't using drugs, but he just shifted the goalposts on his addiction. Instead of being addicted to drugs, he was addicted to jujitsu or addicted to the Me Too movement or addicted to a person with Aja Argento. And so it was really, and when you see it all together, it's so very clear.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's so clear where he's headed and where he's going, which is gutting to watch. It's haunting and awful and also fascinating.
And some of the behind the scenes footage, when you see him just standing there quietly looking pained.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there was the one scene where he was sitting by a fire at night, and then you can overhear someone in the audio who's dancing nearby say he's just sitting there staring at the fire and crying or something. You overhear her say, and it's just, like you can see the pain. It's there, and it's forgive the metaphor, but it's you're watching it, and it's almost like a slow motion.
Yeah.
Crash.
Yeah.
You're like, you know where it's going, and you so badly don't want it to go there. And even, you know, a couple of years out from his death, I don't think dealing with it was any easier. It forced me to like reconfront his death again watching this documentary.
Yeah.
Because it's just, you know, it really gets back into it and forces you to like really look at it closely and see how his life kind of led in that direction, especially seeing, I forget which one of his shows it was, but seeing him go back to Provincetown and those clips of him on the beach talking about his youth here in Massachusetts and when he was a young chef, when he was, you know, doing heroin, other drugs. It's, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just brought it all back to me. It was like a rush of that.
Yeah, I appreciated in particular. I had heard of him, but I'm not really familiar with his work, and I really want to get into it. But David Cho, the artist, who does circle back around to the drug thing eventually, he says, you know, but you have to remember, Tony was a junkie, and it's like, there it is. And then he goes through what you guys were saying, the addiction to jujitsu, and then to travel, to whatever. And one of the things that struck me, and I think about this a lot, is how suicide, the fallout from it lasts for so long, generationally. And how, granted, he died only 3 years ago, but how every interview subject in this comes to tears at some point, except for Eric Repair, who just says straight out, nope, I won't talk about his death, you know?
Yep. Which is so interesting because they were such, you know, they were such good friends. And it's really, anyway. Circling
back around to his friendship with Eric, Bourdain's friendship with Eric Repair, there's an episode of, I can't remember which show it is, if it's the one from the Travel Channel, the one from CNN, but when they go back to Leal and they're working in the kitchen and Tony is, he's doing the tickets, you know, he's running the kitchen, and then Eric Repair is making steaks with the steak guy, and Tony, he doesn't have his reading glasses, he can't see what's going on, you know, and Eric Repair is just over making steaks with the steak guy, having the time of his fucking life.
I always loved watching the two of them when they would guest judge on Top Chef. Like that was always such a delight. See, the two of them, they're so different in their styles, but yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah.
So I will need to check that out.
But I also just like, I was struck, not surprised, but struck by how just everyone is still in pieces when they think about it. Like how David Chang, for a good third of the time he's on camera, is in tears. How Cho is in tears. How Josh Homme, who you don't think of as a guy who like breaks down and like at the end, he just starts crying and he goes, fuck, like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And when he talks about not working for
2 years,
not really, not making music because this has like affected him.
Yeah, you don't think about how those things affect. Now, granted, he didn't die by suicide, but Neil Peart died about 1.5 years ago, and I saw an interview with Alex Lifeson, Neil Peart from Rush, Alex Lifeson from Rush, how Alex Lifeson used to play guitar just even if he wasn't working 2 hours a day, whatever. And he's like, I can't play guitar for more than 10 minutes before I just get sad and have to put it down. Like, it's just
sad.
The people that we love when they go, however they go, it can really be devastating. And what I think this documentary also is interesting is like you get, they all knew that, for lack of a better term, Anthony Bourdain had this dark side. I don't want to say dark side. That's stupid. He struggled with.
I think someone said he was a dark motherfucker. I think it was one of the quotes.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
But he struggled with depression, and you know they talk about how every once in a while they would get an email that was so clearly difficult for him to send, and he didn't say.
David Cho said that. Yes,
Cho says that. He's like, I think about that email all the time.
Yep.
And I read it all the time and I think about how hard that must have been for him to send. But at the same time, it's like, you don't really know just how much someone is struggling if they don't tell you, even if you can tell,
That's very true. Well, that it also speaks to his ex-wife, or one of his ex-wives, the one who's in the film, talking about, she's like, I think about all the time, what if I'd done something different? Or what if I, I could have done something? And I'm like, I don't know if you could have, like, like sometimes there is nothing to do, and I think that's the really scary truth about talking about, suicide and suicidal ideation, that you can be there for people. You can let them know how much you care and you love them and all of those things. Sometimes they're just, I don't want to be so defeatist, but sometimes there's not. You can't blame yourself, and
yeah. Well, and one of the people says, I don't remember which person it is, but his second marriage to his second wife, whose name escapes me right now, Octavia, thank you. And
yes, the one who's in the film, yes.
Yep. And then his daughter, they're like that. I feel like that was the deviation. That changed, that just pushed the ending 10 years farther down the road. And to hear that, it's just like, it's one of those to use your phrase, it's fatalistic, but it's like, it's a strange, like, you can't walk up to someone and say, you know what, you seem like you could. I don't know what kind of reaction you would get, but
that's the thing. You can say it. You're absolutely right, but you don't know if they'll receive it.
Right. Exactly. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like he seriously needed to get into a program to deal with his addiction. And I mean, that's like watching it and having had enough people in my life close to me who are in recovery or have dealt with, with the back and forth of addiction. I would say that's what it seemed like he needed more than anything.
Yeah.
But even saying that, he might not have been ready to do it, so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I've known a lot of junkies in my day. And one of the things that's interesting is, a lot of people think when you get off heroin, you don't have a problem anymore.
Oh, no.
And you can still drink alcohol, or you can do, and you really, not in my experience. I mean, it's now granted, that's just my experience, but
no, but you have to deal with the underlying reasons
exactly.
of the addiction.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know, like, yeah.
yeah. But
I don't know why, like, I'm not like informing anyone of anything, but I feel like it still needs to be said.
Right. Well, this is one of the things that's so difficult about addiction is, you either get it or you don't, and that goes for addicts and alcoholics. We don't say addicts anymore. That goes for alcoholics and non-alcoholics. Like, you either get it or you don't. And eventually you can get it if you haven't before, but I mean, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
That's, that's why it's, I like to cut people breaks who are clearly struggling. So,
oh, totally.
I do remember, I think I was a fan. I was more than a casual fan, but not like a mega fan. I've read a couple of course, like a lot of people, I've read Kitchen Confidential, and I watched his shows a lot, and was always kind of struck by his ability to find nuance and to articulate it.
Very articulate guy.
Yeah. And I think that it's a real loss for popular culture, for whatever, I don't know what you want to call it. But I did want to push back on, not push back. They kind of they cover the whole Asia Argento thing and her role in his life.
I'm curious why she's not in this documentary, though.
Well, she probably didn't want to be. I mean,
considering the horrific way she was depicted in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe she's dealing with her own legal problems now for other things that they don't touch on in the documentary. And why would they? They don't affect this particular story. But she has a complicated history herself. So it's, I think it's unfair to pin, you just can't pin Anthony Bourdain's death on her the way
Oh God, no.
so many people did. It's just one, like, she is one piece in a giant puzzle. Maybe an outsized piece, but like not
right.
There's no one thing. There's no one thing.
Right. What I wish instead, one, I wish she'd been in the documentary, but maybe you're right. Maybe she declined. Maybe who knows what happened. I mean, well, somebody may know, but I haven't looked into this. I should have, but you're right. You can't blame one person. And what I wish the documentary had done, it would have, but I mean, again, you can't direct how your talking heads are going to respond or what they're going to say or what they feel. But it would have been nice if one person at least was like, it wasn't her. It's not her fault. She didn't do anything. It's just the combination of the two of them. There was a toxicity.
Yeah.
And because that is probably way more accurate. And it probably was just the fact that their relationship potentially, and I say potentially because I don't know, but their relationship was potentially volatile, and he was struggling so much with so many things that it just wasn't a good fit, no matter how, how much they loved each other, no matter how enamored he was with her. So I wish it had been framed that way rather than, blaming her the way it very much feels.
Yeah, it does and it doesn't. Like, I know where you're coming from, and I definitely feel the blame in there, but it does seem like some of them make an effort to there's so
there was that one line where someone said how can that not push someone away or something like that, the way his obsessiveness with her, they did mention. And then there was the line where he himself knew that was not going to end well for whatever reason,
right?
he made that comment of like, oh, it's
that's true,
it's not going to go well, or it's not going to end well. It's when I was like going to burn real hot real quick.
Yeah.
But then
and we also don't know whether they were together or not when he died. Like, I don't think that's clear.
Oh, I think they were.
Oh, were they? Okay.
I think so. Going maybe, and maybe not, maybe I'm mistaken, but seeing her reactions on social media to his death, it sure seemed like they were together, but maybe they weren't.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know. I mean,
no, that's totally true. You're right.
He can't tell us, and she probably won't. So,
No, that's fair. Yeah.
But anyway, a lot of this at this point has become speculative. So,
very true.
Right.
So I want to say I want to say something that's rooted
sure
in facts. Kind of getting away from this a bit. I think something that speaks to the testament of Anthony Bourdain's character, and something that struck me, and it's something I had read before because I did not watch his show, and I really want to go back and watch his travel show because it obviously seems so interesting and compelling. But when the show was in Beirut and the war hit, and he's like, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. This is not airing. We're not going to exploit these people's pain. And I had such respect for him for doing that. And, of course, the network had very different plans, but the fact that he was like, nope, that's gross, we're not doing it. I was like, geez, what that just speaks to someone's their integrity, and which I have a lot of respect for.
I also appreciate how he says on camera, like not for the show, but they're filming and he says, so there's a war going on 1,000 yards away from us, and we're over here by the pool.
In the hotel,
that should paint a picture for you. And there's a pause or whatever he says, and he's like, and not a flattering one.
Yes, no, totally, yeah. And also, I mean, this is kind of along the same lines, but still different. But something else that was great that he did in his shows he was, he worked in such a fine dining establishment, and like he had such a fine dining background, and he had like secret dinners like in back rooms of restaurants for his industry friends. So there was there was that kind of upper echelon of the restaurateurs and restaurant industry, but yet he also was traveling all over, and he would find what he would say would be, the best food in street food, or from in someone's home. And the fact that he saw food as this kind of equalizer, and he even talks about that, where he says that might be naive, but I think that's really admirable too. And that he didn't have kind of a hierarchy when it came to viewing food.
Yeah. I loved in his shows the way he would just kind of like get down into, like, he would just like throw himself into whatever it was that someone was going to take him. You know, he's like, we're going to take you to this, you know, random cafe. Like, okay, let's go. Let's do it. I'm going to eat everything that's in front of me. I'm going to talk to the people who made it. Like, I'm just going to engage with people on a very personal level. And I think there was something incredibly admirable about the way he cared about other people's experiences and wanted to engage with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very well said.
So, Anthony Bourdain, complicated individual, like we all are. So, multi-layered.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. Yes. I can't take credit, by the way, earlier for the phrase psychic pain. I've heard other people say that. So. But it is certainly accurate in this, I think, in this case. But anybody want to have any closing thoughts, or shall we move on?
The one thing I would add, Dave, is a content warning. Just for those that are sensitive to animal suffering, there's some pretty jarring imagery, maybe about an hour in 1 minute or so into the documentary. It's about a minute, a couple of scenes that are really graphic and really hard to watch. So heads up to folks who might be watching this.
Well said. So, and on that note, let's move on to our last movie of the night, Fear Street Part 1, 1994. It's a long title. I mean, Fear Street, Part 1, hyphen, 1994. So this is the first movie in a trilogy based on, I don't think it's based on specific Fear Street books, but it's based on the Fear Street series by R.L. Stine. The first movie in the trilogy takes place in 1994, and the IMDb logline is: a circle of teenage friends accidentally encounters the ancient evil responsible for a series of brutal murders that have plagued their town for more than 300 years. Welcome to Shadyside. Yes, I fixed 2 grammar typos in that. So,
good job.
Well
done.
You wouldn't. It's the way it's written. It says a circle of teenage friends accidentally encounter. Circle is the word that goes with encounter, so it's encounters. Anyway,
thanks, Dave, for the grammar lesson.
And you don't go over. You go over fences. You have more than 300 years. Anyway,
Grammar Piece Theater Part 2.
Yes,
2021.
So anyway, this stars Kiana Madeira, Olivia Scott Welch, a bunch of people you've seen, but you might not know specifically who they are. I know that I've seen a lot of them, but didn't know them intimately. And so this movie kind of starts out with a sort of, I've seen a lot of stuff written on the interwebs and on Letterboxd about how this movie is ripping off a lot of different franchises. And I don't think that's true. I think you can see it that way. I think that this is large. I mean, obviously, you know, the slow motion stabbing at the beginning of this, spoiler alert, when Maya Hawke is done in.
Maya Hawke is great in this, by the way.
Straight out of Scream, but
it is.
But on purpose.
It's an homage.
Exactly. On purpose. Homage. It's not like, you know, it's not like how Friday the 13th was fucking stealing from Halloween. It's like
right. This movie isn't cribbing from other people and then trying to like pass it off as their own notes,
right?
You know, or their own. I mean, it is definitely paying homage, and
and smartly most of the time.
Yeah. No, this is a very loving ode to slasher films and a throwback to 90s horror.
Yeah. That being said, though, I didn't really feel like I was in the 90s. I do have to say that. I mean, everything's period appropriate and X, Y, and Z, but still, it felt pretty contemporary to me. It did.
I don't
know that it did.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't feel that way at all. From the phones, no cell phones, to the needle drops of the 90s, to the mall. I didn't. Yeah, I felt this was very period appropriate.
Let's talk about needle
90s vibes.
Let's just talk about needle drops for a moment. More Human Than Human didn't come out until 1995. This movie takes place in 1994.
I knew you were too. I know.
You were going to comment on the anachronistic songs.
There are several songs that are close to the right time, but they're not the right time. But that's okay. I think this is more. It's not like, you know, super egregious. I mean, those songs do evoke the time period, and for example, More Human Than Human is probably the most famous White Zombie song, I would guess. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Dragula.
Yeah. And Dragula. Anyway, I love the slide guitar in More Human Than Human. It's so...
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's such a fucking great song. I mean, granted, you have to listen to Rob Zombie sing, but the music in it is delightful.
It is.
But the movie, let's talk about the movie. So...
but the needle drops are so good.
I know, the needle drops are...
I think the needle drops... But it is important to talk about because I feel like in the beginning of the movie, it was a little frenetic with the music. It was like doing that, like, I'm going to switch rapidly between songs just a little bit too much. And I'm glad it kind of settled into a better pace as the movie went on.
Yeah, well,
I agree.
So this movie is interesting in the sense that you think it's going to be, or I thought it was going to be a kind of a straight slasher movie kind of thing. But in a way, and it's a better movie than this, but in a way, it's a little bit like Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow in the sense that there's some evil presence controlling the evil in the story. Now, it's done a lot better in this than in Sleepy Hollow, but it did remind me of that. And also some really good performances in this. I mean, I want to say that I'm glad that people take horror movies more seriously now than they used to. And when I say people, I mean studios. Because they're casting good actors in these parts. And you need that shit to sell a horror movie. Because, the whole idea of an evil, of a witch taking revenge on a town for 300 years, you got to suspend some disbelief.
But I'm here for that curse.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, by the way, one of the things I just want to mention that I actually found surprisingly emotional is when Maya Hawke is being stabbed to death by her boyfriend. I don't know what he is. Another guy who works in the mall.
I think he's just a friend.
Who she's friendly with. And she looks at him and she's like, it's me. And as he's stabbing her to death, and it's like, poor thing.
Yeah, no, like I said, she was great in such a small role. She really made the most of it.
Yes, in the Drew Barrymore role, which is uncharitable to the movie and to her. But
right, but I will say not a dig on Drew Barrymore in general, but I think Maya Hawke does an even better job just in, evoking pathos.
Yeah, in a shorter scene also than the opening scene of Scream.
Yeah.
But so the idea is that there is this witch who was, and we don't. I guess maybe she was a witch. I don't know. The movie calls her a witch, so I'll call her a witch.
She's hung for being a witch.
She's hanged for being a witch, and her hand. She severed her own hand from her arm.
Before the witch took her final breath, she cut off her cursed hand and kept her grip upon our land.
There you go. There it is.
Oh my god!
And
by the way, I want to say I like that she was hung because that was way more accurate than having people burned at the stake. That is a misnomer that witches were burned at the stake. They were, but they were mostly hung.
Well, burning at the stake is difficult. Hanging somebody.
Exactly. It's much easier to hang somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Which sounds kind of callous, but it's totally true. So,
historically, it just is.
Yeah.
As awful as that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the witches cursed the town.
The witches cursed the town. And what's interesting is like, the movie kind of plays with the idea that maybe it's not a curse. Maybe everyone's just an asshole, whatever. But then it turns out, oh no, the witch really did curse everyone, and we are all fucked over by this thing. And and it's happened before. Hence, the second movie in the trilogy takes place in 1978.
Yeah, I'm curious if they're going to flesh out the mythology because, like in this movie, it's activated by disturbing the witch's bones, which are very shallowly buried and
very shallowly buried
marker.
Yeah, what is that about?
Is it every time someone's tripping and falling over her bones in the woods, and that's what's triggering this?
Good question. We're gonna find out, maybe.
Well, I've seen the second one already.
Well, don't spoil it. I know it's a spoiler piece.
I won't. But there is an explanation that makes sense to me. It made sense.
I have to interject. I can't handle not saying this anymore. I love that the leads are a queer couple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to get that out. I was so excited.
Oh. Well, I also I appreciate that they're a queer couple in 1994.
Yes, they're a queer interracial couple.
Yes, that too. And one of them, of course, is a cheerleader, and the other one's in band, which just that cracked me up.
So perfect.
Yeah, I was just like, she's in the marching band, of course. And
riding the buses together. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So, but of course, the Dina, who is the band geek. I was a band geek, whatever. Dina,
I was band geek adjacent, so I understand.
Yeah. Dina is the one who's ready to be out, and I guess she is out because, or she's out. Like people know she's, not straight.
A lesbian. She calls herself a lesbian.
Does she? Okay, I don't remember that.
She does.
And then the cheerleader, what's her name? Her character's name?
Sam.
Sam. Thank you. Of course, her name's Sam because it's the 90s. She's
right, especially in the beginning where it's like Dina's upset about breaking up with Sam or her ex Sam, and it's like, okay, we're Sam, we got a name that could tip either way, so let's wait and see how this turns out.
Yeah. And then so anyway, Sam is a cheerleader, and she is she's from Shadyside also, but she has moved to Sunnyvale, which is the neighboring town, which is not cursed, which is a very important story thread, as it turns out.
Eagleton. For you Parks and Rec fans.
Nice, Evan. Nice. I always love a Parks and Rec reference.
And the idea is that now it's interesting here. It sounds to me like Sam obviously doesn't want to, come out and deal with coming out. But I think if I recall correctly, Dina broke up with her when she moved to Sunnyvale. Doesn't Sam say that? It's like, you broke up with me,
Yes.
So that's important. But anyway, let's get into the whole, like, them and their friends, like, running from fucking serial killers who have long been dead, who are trying to kill Sam because she bleeds on the witch's bones, which, of course, then means that the witch has you in her sights and will stop at nothing to kill you. Okay. So they all end up in the school, and they figure out that if they have some of Sam's blood on them, which they all do for reasons or another, like Sam gets like slashed at some point by somebody, and so some of her blood gets on Dina's shoe, and then it gets on this other kid's shirt, and then
they mop with it.
Yeah. And so they've all got like blood, and so all of the serial killers that the witch is like throwing at them, which is the Axe Murderer from 1978, which is the second movie, which that's not a spoiler. They like make that clear. And then there was a woman, like a high school student, who slashed a bunch of people in the 50s, and she pops up, or was it the 60s? I don't remember.
I think it was the 50s.
Yeah, that's right. But they all come up with a plan to foil the witch. And of course, Gillian Jacobs shows up as the thread between the first movie and the second movie. Thankfully, she shows up because I love me some Gillian Jacobs. But anyway, was anybody surprised by the horrific deaths of two of the characters at the end of the movie?
Yeah, not the axe one. Yeah, not the axe to the head. That one I was not surprised by at all. But oh my God, Katie's
the bread slicer. Oh boy,
yes, and her head going in. Oh my God,
I didn't think they were gonna do it. I was shocked. It was so late in the movie.
Yeah,
and I just thought, okay, all the kids are gonna make it out of this.
Yeah,
and then even when she was on the conveyor belt headed toward the bread slicer, I thought she'll get out of it, or someone will come and help her. No.
No, and they tease it out, like it's pretty effective editing right there. They tease it out and make you think that she might get out of it, but then there's a point where her hair, and she doesn't get tangled up in the bread slicer, but her hair is just in the bread slicer, and you're like, nope, she's not getting out of this. And then and it's a practical effect too. So there's a mix of CGI and practical effects in this, and the practical effects they saved for the good ones. Oh boy.
Oh yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I mean, that bread slicer is like that's right up there with like 70s Giallo shit. I mean, I remember I wound that back a couple times, and I was just like, oh my God, because I love horror movies, so even though I find kills like that highly disturbing. I have to watch them more than once. I don't know what my problem is.
Well, I mean, you're in good company. We all love horror here, so
yeah,
you're in the right place.
But wasn't expecting those people to die. I was impressed that the movie went there.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, it made sense that he died, but the way that is it Simon? Is that his name? The kid who gets the axe to the head.
Yep.
You think he's going to get out of it too, because they've hunkered down in this grocery store they figure out that what needs to happen is Sam needs to die to break the witch's curse. And then they plan on, like having her swallow a bunch of pills, and it's this, pharmaceutical kind of thing. And then they'll revive her.
It's a weird idea.
Yeah, it's a weird idea.
I don't know why they go there. The drowning or the suffocating would have made more sense than to try and rely on some weird system of pills.
Yeah. Well, Simon apparently knew how to do it, so they trusted him. But anyway, Simon is running away from the straight razor killer from the 50s because she's shown up, of course. And he's like, "Go, man, go. She's right behind us." And so Dina's brother is with them. His name's Josh. And they haul ass down one of the aisles. And, Josh is looking one way and Simon's looking the other. And then all of a sudden, this axe killer from 1978 just buries his axe in Simon's head. And you're like, oh, shit. Didn't see that coming. Well, Megan saw it coming, I guess, but I didn't see it coming.
No, I just said I wasn't surprised. Yeah, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't see it. I didn't see it coming per se, but just and I also didn't think it was super, super gory. It was the right amount of gory.
Yeah, that one wasn't so gory. I mean, after you've done the head through the bread slicer, I mean, right? that's kind of your coup d'etat.
That's it. That's your pinnacle. You're not. Nothing can top that.
Yeah, all the other ones can be suggestive. It's like it's David Fincher says the first murder in Zodiac is so violent because he's like, I just wanted to get it out of the way so that everybody could just enjoy the police procedural that the movie is. It's like, that makes a lot of sense.
I wanted to, just backing up slightly. I just want to say, yeah, the pill plan is kind of okay, but I will say I do like the luring of the blood plan and the fire plan, and it was a good idea in theory.
Yeah,
but they didn't expect them all to regenerate. Although I'm not entirely sure why they didn't expect them to regenerate.
Yeah, they already shot one of them and it came back to life. And came
right, exactly. Them. Yeah, the razor girl. So yeah, so I don't know why, but again, a lot of times fire in mythologies, destroys beings, so
yeah,
but it's still a good plan nonetheless.
Yep. So
but wait, I'm sorry, the other thing, so that was a good plan. The one thing I will say though that bothered me was that and we've already passed it plot wise, so that's why I'm going back, is that we don't need everybody to hook up. We don't need everybody to pair up in a movie. And that really irritates me. We did not need
Katie and Josh.
We did not need Dina's brother, Josh, to hook up with Katie. It just was irritating.
It was a little unnecessary. I'll
just let's focus on the queer ladies. Let's just focus on them.
Yeah. So anyway, so Dina and Sam and Josh get away ultimately, and they think that they have broken the witch's curse because Sam has, died and she ends up being drowned, and then she has been revived, and then Dina and Sam are going on a proper date, something like that. And then Gillian Jacobs, the phone call, Gillian Jacobs calls them, returns their call a day late because they called her and they're like, "You survived the 1978 killing. How? Blah, blah, blah." And
it sounded just like that.
Exactly. And Gillian Jacobs is like, "Well, I died and they resuscitated me. That's how," except that's not really how. It's kind of how. The witch somehow shows up at the house. I don't remember exactly how this happens, but she possesses Sam.
It's because the name is in the stone due to a ritual.
Oh, that's right. The name
that someone is doing.
Right. So anyway, Sam stabs Dina while she's finishing up the phone call. And then you have this really loud, fight while Josh is downstairs on the computer in the early days of the internet talking about, shady side killers and stuff like that. And then Dina comes downstairs and she's like, "Dude, come check this shit out." And goes upstairs and she has hog-tied Sam, who I don't know how she recovered from that stab wound, by the way, to do this, but okay. Because I've never been stabbed, but it seems like it would be unpleasant at best. So,
adrenaline is working.
True. Okay. Adrenaline's working.
I'm chalking it up to that.
And it's a horror movie. Why not?
And it's a stomach wound. Those take a long time to bleed out. So,
yeah. So anyway, Dina overpowers Sam and gets her hogtied. And then what do they do? Someone help me out.
Well, I mean, I'd like to talk more about like what we think works and what we liked about it.
Yeah. What worked for you? What didn't work for you? I think the whole them not realizing the regeneration thing was a thing didn't work for you too.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like, there's always a suspension of disbelief when you see horror movies. Like, okay, the characters are doing the best they can in the circumstances. Could they be smarter? Yeah. So like that kind of stuff like didn't always work for me, but I take some of that with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, there's something about this movie that like I liked it but I didn't love it, and I think it's just the fact that it does pay homage to so many other horror movies, but there were times where I wanted more originality from it, and not in a, like, you can't borrow or you can't, I don't know, I'm doing a poor job of articulating it, but basically for me it boiled down to like it didn't feel like enough of its own thing in certain places. And I'm hoping maybe with the additional movies that the world building will happen and I'll feel more like it's its own thing.
Interesting.
That's very fair. But I know we talk about this a lot, but I would say that a film, no matter whether it's a trilogy or what have you, it still should be able to stand on its own. So, but you're very right, Evan.
Yeah. I liked this a lot. I liked
this too.
Yeah. I liked it enough to watch the second one, which I've already seen, which you two haven't. So I'll not get into that. But there were like the whole time I was watching it, I was like, this, it's really watchable, but it's not as good as it should be. And then when they finally got into the final battle with the witches, sycophants, killer, I don't know what you call them. The other killers that the witch is sending back.
The henchmen, I think somebody calls them.
Yes. When they're in the school and then finally in the grocery store, that's when it really started to like pull together for me. I did like it though when Simon came upon the the straight razor killer on the street and he was like, "Hey, do you need trouble?" And then she just slices him. I was like, "Oh shit." Anyway, because I was like, it's like, you shouldn't approach a woman who's just like singing to herself sitting against a lamppost, dude. I mean, come on. But okay. Yeah, I can't really put it into words. Like, it was watchable. It wasn't great, but it made me want to watch the second one. Maybe because like I thought if they can explain this mythology that's kind of underlying this whole thing, then it'll be worth it. So, yeah. Anyway,
I think that's where I'm at too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed this. I agree that it's watchable. I mean, there's some nitpicky things I have. Like I said, I'm not a fan of necessarily partnering everybody up. Romantically, it doesn't need to happen. I also don't think that all the characters are very well drawn. I think Dina kind of is. Sam, kind of. Josh, kind of, although it's relying on a lot of tropes.
Yeah.
About like being a nerd and, being really, tech savvy. Although I will say usually that's a person who is a white character and Josh is a black character. So that's a nice refreshing change. I love that we have queer ladies, teen ladies. That's great. I also think something that we have not discussed at all really is I think there's a really interesting, it's a small commentary or it's not happening necessarily throughout the entire film, but it's still a salient commentary nonetheless on class and classism happening in the film, like between Shadyside and, oh my God, Sunnyvale. Is that the other one?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very Buffy the Vampire Slayer nod, feels like. But anyway, I like that there's kind of a class commentary, especially it happens in the beginning when the two football teams, duel in the beginning and clash. And then at the end when Dina is talking to the cop and he's like, you got to tell me more. I'm going to blame, Katie and Simon that they're, junkie drug dealers. And she's like, but that's not the reality. And she's like, but of course that's the narrative that you're going to go with and that the media is going to go with. And, kind of overachieving underprivileged kids. And and that's really sad to see. And, they make a lot of references to Dina's dad, who is struggling with alcoholism and is not around. And so I like those moments where we're seeing, I just wish we saw more. And especially I love Lee Janiak's first film, Honeymoon. It is such a great, creepy body horror film. And I liked this a lot. And I love that she directed all 3 of these films. I think that's great. And I've been wanting to know what she's going to do next for years. So it's great. And I had fun with this and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yay.
Yay!
Yeah. I think we all enjoyed it enough to watch the next. Well, I already watched the next one, but you two already.
As you keep telling us, I know it just makes me want to watch it more.
Well, when we get off mic, I'll fill you in a little bit, but not too much.
No, I don't want to know anything.
Okay. Well, I think there'll be something that that you would be pleased about, but based on what you're saying. Any spray. Evan,
but I'm excited to see it regardless.
Evan, are you more excited for 1978, or is it more like, okay, fine? I mean, okay.
No, I'm definitely interested. I'm intrigued. I don't know if I'm super excited, but I'm definitely anxious to see what comes next in the story. So the film was definitely successful in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say though that I love 90s music, and so I know I keep coming back to the needle drops, but they're really great. I'm sorry, but having Garbage and Portishead, and Bush, yes.
Always down for some Portishead,
Yes, me too. Give it all to me. Give me all of that. I love the 90s music. It was great.
Yeah.
Soundgarden. Oh, so many. Anyway, so we won't get those obviously in the 70s movie because it's 78. But who knows? Maybe we'll get some great music there too. I'm excited to see.
Yep.
I like that they actually fit in with what was happening in the film. They weren't just kind of tossed in there willy-nilly for no reason.
Okay. I mean, yeah. Okay. Lyrically,
and
more human than human does kind of make sense.
It makes sense.
Even though time period wise, it's not quite right. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was also going to say that, and I mentioned this earlier about the mall and feeling very 90s-esque. I love a horror movie in a mall. I love that it's happening in a B. Dalton bookstore because I love a bookstore and I love that. And I just love those little touches. So,
I did want to talk about my one major problem with the movie, having worked in a shopping center. When they close at 9:00 or whenever they close, they're not immediately empty like they are in this movie. So
they're not, but that's so funny. That's not the quibble I thought you were going to have with it.
Oh,
I thought someone was going to complain about how the gate wasn't locked and how it was left open. And I'm like, yeah. And that is totally normal. You would leave your gate open like that.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, you would have it about 2/3 of the way down. So you could crawl underneath it and then you would pull it down and lock it
afterwards.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. No, but I love it. I was like, that's an actual gate that or looks like an actual gate from a mall. That's great. I love it.
Yep. Okay. Evan, any parting thoughts on Fear Street Part 1, 1994?
No.
Okay. Well then, gang, let's recap No Ordinary Man. Are we seeing it or are we not seeing it?
I would say see it.
Yeah, I would say see it. I wish I was more engaged or maybe it was tighter, but it really is an important story to care about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to trans history, absolutely, which is important for all of us.
Yeah. And so that comes out in theaters and on demand, if memory serves. Yeah, it's in theaters today. Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain. See, don't see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm definitely on board for this one. That'll be in theaters and on streaming eventually. And then Fear Street Part 1, that's on Netflix. And it sounds like we would all say, let's see that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Wanted to remind you really quickly about what's over on our Patreon page. Before we sign off, we talk about the 1998 romantic comedy You've Got Mail. If you are a $5 or higher Patreon, that's all for you. And if you're not one, please consider becoming one. That would be delightful. We want to thank our editor, Otto Clammer. Thank you so much, Otto, for taking the heavy burden of editing out of our hands each week and doing it for us.
Thanks, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you can get podcasts. You can find our website, spoilerpiece.com, if you want to check us out there. If you want to get in touch with us on social media, We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you would like to drop us a line and tell us, hey, I already saw Fear Street 1978, and hoo boy, the email is spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail. Let us know why Sam shouldn't have been possessed, but Dina should have been. Whatever.
And my God, we didn't even talk about the possession. There was so much I had to say. Anyway, I'll save it for next week.
And if you really, really like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. That helps us out a lot, especially on the Apple Podcasts. And if you really, really like the show, like I mentioned about 30 seconds ago, please consider joining our Patreon. This week, it's, like I said, you've got mail. And we would also like to thank our patrons.
Yes, we want to give a huge thank you to Bill Scahan, Bob Chipman, Charles Nash, Chris Wilkinson, Davida Margolin, Deirdre Crimmins, Christopher Jensen, Max Coville, Mike, Lord of the Sith, Sean Pensionar, Shauna Harris, Shelley McCaskill, Shona Glasgow, and Zach Pigeon.
Thank you, patrons.
Thanks, patrons.
So, my name is Dave Riedel. You can find me on the tweets and the Instagrams and the Letterboxd as Dave Sees Movies. I write about movies for different places. And yeah, that's it.
My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
My name is Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network, a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionS World and on Instagram and Letterboxd at The OpinionS.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.